And welcome to the briefing room on this Monday. I'm Devin Dwyer, joined by our senior national correspondent Terry Moran, our deputy political director Mary Alice Parks, on a big Monday with the Supreme Court nomination in turmoil today. A lot of headlines to unpack. It's all about Kavanaugh today here in the briefing room. The White House had teased a possible briefing today. They're not having one, perhaps because they're dealing with this crisis. We know the judge was over at the White House today as well. But Terry, walk us through the allegations as you know them today. You've spent a lot of time parsing the reporting on this. Of course, Christine Ford came out over the weekend, spoke to the Washington Post. Her lawyer was out there today. But so many rumors, so much speculation has been swirling around this story until we heard now from her some very specific claims here.
We now know her account. And it's something that happened between, or among, I should say, there are three involved, high schoolers 35 years ago in Maryland. She was a student at a Tony girls prep school. Kavanaugh and the other person alleged to be in that room, Mark Judge, were students at Georgetown Prep, another Tony school, and at a party. She can't remember the year, but she actually remembers the layout of the house. She has a specific memory of what that place looked like. She says that Kavanaugh and his friend, she named him Mark Judge, who's come out and denied it as well, trapped her in a room. They were very drunk. Kavanaugh got on her, tried to force himself on her. They turned up the music. They were laughing maniacally. It's a terrifying memory that she describes.
Covering her mouth.
Covering
her
mouth.
A lot of details.
A lot of details. And that at some point it broke up. She managed to escape and flee. She did not speak of it, by her own account, for decades, until couples therapy, when she and her husband were in marital therapy, and the therapist's notes were provided, or a portion of them, to the Washington Post.
Fascinating detail on those relatively contemporaneous.
Well, 30 years.
30 years later, but not in the midst of this crisis,
Correct.
Which is very interesting. And a lie detector test, too, Terry.
Yeah, lie detector tests aren't admissible as evidence, but for what it's worth, and it depends on your opinion of lie detector tests, her own team, gave her a lie detector test, and it indicated that she was truthful.
Okay, and today, the lawyer for this woman, Christine Blasi Ford, Deborah Katz, was on Good Morning America. She offered a little bit more detail about this account and what she's willing to do now. Take a listen.
She's willing to cooperate. What she's not willing to do is to be part of this bloodletting that happens in Washington. We only need to look at the Anita Hill hearings to know what that's going to look like. And that's not a fair way to get at the truth.
So what does that mean? That she would talk to the FBI, but that she doesn't want to testify publicly before the Senate Judiciary Committee?
I'm not saying that. We will consider all options. What I'm saying is that this has to be fair and thorough. And it can't be part of a slugging match. If we're really trying to get at the truth, hearings should not be used to be weaponized against those who accuse powerful men. And that's how this is being set up.
Okay, so she's willing to speak to Congress, willing to tell her story, maybe not in a hearing, maybe so. But this sets up, Mary Alice, an extraordinary situation. Now we have the most contentious Supreme Court nomination in a generation. Everybody's in their corners. And now, since those interviews this morning, we have a bipartisan consensus coming together that she should be heard. The only question seems to be how.
How? Should it be something that the FBI does? Should it be publicly in front of the entire country, or privately, just with senators, under oath, not under oath? But everyone seems to agree at this point that she needs to be heard. I was struck by Chairman Grassley, the Republican head of the oh, my phone is speaking to me, sorry. The Republican head of the Judiciary Committee, saying that he thought she deserved to be heard. I think that speaks a lot to the political moment right now, and the seriousness of these allegations. You know, I think that her lawyer really hit on something that will strike a nerve with a lot of women around this country, a fear that they are going to be dragged through the mud if they speak out, a fear that their own reputation is going to be on the line, that someone is going to bash them and bash their motivations if they talk about something that happened in their past. And I think that right now the country is grappling with a lot of stories that sound like this, and that's why these senators know they can't really brush it off.
And we know that critical Republican Senate vote, Susan Collins, has said she was one of the first to come out and say there needs to be public hearings with both Judge Kavanaugh and Ms. Ford. We also know that a number of Republicans are calling simply for staff to investigate this for the time being, for phone calls to be placed to both to do phone interviews, in essence, and to report back. Interestingly, just in the past few minutes, the president has weighed in. He's actually in favor of the process playing out as well. Let's listen to him and then go to the White House.
Judge Kavanaugh is one of the finest people that I've ever known. He's an outstanding intellect, an outstanding judge, respected by everybody. Never had even a little blemish on his record. The FBI has, I think, gone through a process 6 times with him over the years where he went to higher and higher positions. He is somebody very special. At the same time, we want to go through a process. We want to make sure everything is perfect, everything is just right. I wish the Democrats could have done this a lot sooner because they had this information for many months, and they shouldn't have waited till literally the last days. They should have done it a lot sooner. But with all of that being said, we want to go through the process.
Okay, let's bring in White House reporter Karen Travers now, who has been following this all morning. Karen, interesting to hear the president call for the process. It seems that some of his advisors got to him and said, be respectful of the woman, allow this to play out. We know that the White House brought over Judge Kavanaugh this morning. Is he still there? What are you hearing?
It was an incredibly measured statement from President Trump, Devin. We were all expecting a tweet at some point on Sunday or a tweet this morning, the president firing off a strong defense of his Supreme Court nominee, but that never came. Instead, the president kept that focus on Brett Kavanaugh's quality as a person. He says he has an outstanding intellect. He's an outstanding judge. He's one of the finest people the president has ever met. One thing we did not hear the president say, Devin, was that Brett Kavanaugh has denied these allegations. We know he has. Very strong statement earlier this morning issued by the White House. But I thought it was notable that the president didn't turn to that because that's what he's done in the past. When Rob Porter, his former staff secretary, was accused of spousal abuse by 2 ex-wives, the president made it very clear. Rob Porter denies it and he accepted that. And there's a whole list of examples of the president where it's somebody close to him or a Republican candidate, Roy Moore down in Alabama. When these allegations came out against people like that, the president would say, they denied it, that's the end of it. So for whatever reason today, the president taking a very measured tone. Brett Kavanaugh, as you say, was at the White House today. The president did not indicate if they had met, but instead trying to keep this on Brett Kavanaugh's record, his qualifications and his intellect. Instead, the president said, we'll just let this process play out and he'll be okay if that means a delay. That's very surprising to all of us here at the White House.
Yeah, and it seems like, Mary Alice, that politically here, Democrats are walking a little bit of a tightrope. Had breakfast this morning with Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, the head chairman of the Democratic Campaign Committee for the Senate. He said there's some concern among Democrats that perhaps if they are seen as blocking President Trump's nominee here, it could animate Republicans, it could backfire on them. So, it could go both ways. Obviously, there are some progressives who are calling for them to do more.
Absolutely. The politics right now are totally unclear and can play out in a lot of different ways. Dianne Feinstein's in a tough election herself. She's been facing probably the most serious challenger from the left that she's had in her recent career, a challenger who said that he thought she was playing too nice, playing by the rules all along, and now she's caught up in a lot of serious questions about her timeline, when she brought this forward, if she should have brought it forward sooner.
Yeah, and you've been talking to Feinstein's staff today. Let's break that down. That's such a key question here is why now? Why is this woman coming forward at this point? And we learned over the weekend that Senator Feinstein had these allegations since mid-July, and the White House says she sat on them. What do you know?
Right, and Chairman Grassley, a Republican counterpart, is blasting her for sitting on them and not even sharing them privately in confidence with her colleagues on the Senate. In his mind, that clearly looks political. Senator Feinstein's office says that it was done to protect her confidentiality, protect her privacy, that Dr. Ford was not interested in being a public face, a public accuser in this way. But a lot of questions, you're right, about the timeline here and whether or not Dianne Feinstein in some way should have brought these accusations out during the public hearings last week.
But even in defiance of what Dr. Ford wanted?
Those are tough questions, but there are people that say he has a lifetime appointment, the potential for a lifetime appointment on the bench. And if these are serious allegations, then they should be brought to him.
Even against the wishes of the alleged victim here. That's tough.
Well, one Republican
tough.
I talked to said even one of the questions is not whether perhaps Dianne Feinstein should have brought them forward publicly, but why didn't she raise them privately? They had
Kavanaugh.
with Kavanaugh. She had a private one-on-one with Judge Kavanaugh. She also, the committee, and we were there, Terry, they had that private meeting with the FBI. There was a representative. Presumably she could have brought up this claim without using the woman's name, sought some more information about it. She didn't do that. So there are a lot of questions to your point about why.
But I think it's important to remember that Dr. Ford did seem to sort of raise her hand in some way, even without her name, even in confidence, as soon as Kavanaugh was on a short list. She says that she called her local representative, wrote a letter to her local rep, wrote to some media outlets, and wrote to Dianne Feinstein. She's a California resident. Feinstein is her senator. So this idea where the news might be breaking right now in what seems like the 11th hour is different than when these accusations actually seem to have first taken place.
So Terry, look into your crystal ball. You've covered the Anita Hill hearing, which was also very similar. Not a perfect parallel here, but a lot of people asking today, what's going to happen? Where does this go now? And you have Republicans digging in, saying they're full steam ahead, even though they want to hear from the woman. Democrats, of course, trying to delay as long as possible. But what do you see happening in the next couple of weeks?
Well, let's hope it goes better on the part of the Senate than the Anita Hill hearings did. It was a catastrophe. Till 2 o'clock in the morning, I remember watching what I thought was my government kind of just disintegrating in front of me into undisciplined, cruel, against both of the people involved, soap opera. Let's hope they do it better, however they choose to do it. I don't have a lot of confidence in that. Nor do I have a lot of confidence that Dr. Ford's wish that it not be a slugging match, a political slugfest. This is a political process. It is a lifetime appointment on the most powerful court in the land, and they're going to fight each other about it. So what I think the Republicans are going to try to do is avoid a public spectacle. Try to keep her out of the spotlight by putting her under oath on the phone. She doesn't even need to come to Washington in their judgment. They can just have somebody give her the oath, and then Kavanaugh as well. All of the senators on that committee will be invited into that conference call. I don't think that's going to fly for Democrats, but they're going to try and do that.
It'll be very interesting to watch that play out. And, of course, perhaps it's something that she would prefer, not to be in that seat. Perhaps she'd prefer to do it behind closed doors. Meanwhile, as all this is going on, of course, the White House has not had a briefing in over a week. They had the fewest number of White House press briefings in any summer in the last 3 presidencies this past summer. So there's no opportunity to ask them questions about this or their response to Hurricane Florence, which is hitting D.C. this afternoon. But, Mary Alice, you've taken a look at some of the politics around this and this administration's response, the death toll up to 23. How is this playing politically? Is this president's sort of strategic play to withdraw himself and to punt to FEMA on this? Has it worked?
I think probably. I think the president was able to present a confident picture ahead of Florence, talked about all the work that his administration was doing, put administration heads, a FEMA head, out on TV a lot, gave him the green light to be a public face of this, which was probably good. You know, we are only 50 days out today from the November elections, and so all of the political calculations are just even on higher alert than they even normally are. And so whether it's how to play the next few steps of this crisis with Brett Kavanaugh, how to play the next few steps with protecting lives and property in the wake of Florence, there is still a huge political calculation, considering that the Senate and maybe the House and maybe even the Senate are up for grabs.
Big ramifications to follow in the weeks ahead. Terry Moran, Mary Alice Parks, thank you so much. And speaking of the midterms, primary season over. Be sure to check out the latest 538 forecast for the House and the Senate at 538.com and at abcnews.com. Some great analysis there as well. We'll be right back here tomorrow in the briefing room. For Terry, Mary Alice, I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Thanks for watching.